Brothers, welcome back. I'm doing something new today. I've been playing games now for about 30 years and I've always just loved watching tier lists. And I've never made one. And I thought, I want to change that today. Not going to have enough time to stream, got to get on the road for family. So I thought, hell, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's make a tier list. There's going to be a lot to cover in this video, so let's get into it.
You gotta just press record.
Alright, so this is Palmer's first stab at a tier list, and this is updated all the way to World 5. So as you can see, we have all the new elite classes down here at the bottom. And hopefully I can give you just like a little bit more information on classes as you're building your account. This is probably not going to be as useful for the in-game players, but if you're just coming into the game, this is going to tell you, who's stronger when, and, who just has more utility near, the end of the game. So you can't start a tier list without the first guy, right? Number one. So this is going to be the beginner, and it's going to be a quick D pick for me, right? So beginners is a starting class. Everything becomes something from a beginner. It's not great. It doesn't specialize in anything, but it is important because, well, every class becomes something from a beginner. So nothing really too much to talk to about beginners. But then we start to get into the good stuff, and the first one's going to be a warrior. So warrior, I'm going to put as B tier, just because it is especially strong in the early game, because it's going to be one of the first classes that really is good at mobbing, really good at, killing bosses, because it's going to have more health than your other classes. And it's really going to be, at least for me, it was my first pusher, right, getting through World 1 and then getting that elite classes. It was the one with the most health, the one I felt most comfortable killing the first boss with. So B tier for warriors. They're going to specialize in mining. A little bit more on that as we start to getting into, a little bit of the, not elite classes, but the class upgrades. So B tier for warriors. Archers, gonna have to put archers into C tier. They're not too strong in the very start of the game. They're going to become, a lot stronger when you start to go into hunters, when you start to go into siege breakers, you start to go into beastmasters, stuff like that. But at the very start of the game, their impact not felt so much. They're going to end up specializing in smithing, which is going to be important, but at the very start of the game, just, not too good. Next up is going to be the wizard, or I'm sorry, the mage. Very easy C pick for me. Again, they kind of follow suit with the archer there, where they do specialize in something, which is going to be chopping, but their impact is very minimal. It's a class, an ends to a means, if you will. They're not super important early game, but they become the strongest class in the game, the two strongest classes in the game for very niche reasons a little bit later on. So definitely C pick for me. And then first up we have the Journeyman, which is a direct upgrade from the beginner class. So it is a beginner as well, but it is an upgrade from that. It is going to be something that supposedly specializes in looting. But with all the different classes we have out now and the niches that they fill, this is really good for boss killing. But I'm going to put his elite class a little bit higher than that. So I'm going to have to put the Journeyman in the B tier. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, your Journeyman for a long time until you unlock his follow-on class, which is the Maestro. It's not going to be very strong, and it's not going to be something that you will push bosses such as Chaotic Amarok or Chaotic Efont or Chiswar or Troll or the World 5 boss, just because the damage is going to be so minimal on your Journeyman / Maestro that even though you will want him for his exquisite drop rate, you're going to want him for his chance for double loot, not going to be the first class, not going to be the class that you're pushing to get to new worlds with. But he does become very important later on, and once we get into his follow-on class, we can discuss that just a little bit more. Alright, so now we're getting into the good stuff. Now we're getting into the class advancements. We are out of World 1, we are into World 2, and we're starting to look pretty. So the first up is going to be the Barbarian. So the Barbarian is a difficult pick. The Barbarian is eventually going to become a Blood Berserker, and it will specialize in fishing, and it will specialize in mining. So both of those are very important. Both of those do carry a lot of weight. There's going to be a lot of things that you need both ores and fish for, but it's still going to have to be a B tier for me. Definitely better than Maestro, definitely better than Warrior, but there's just other classes that are going to outperform it. Sure, you're going to need it when you start to get your 100 mil copper samples and your, I don't even know how many people fish for 10 mil plus goldfish, but you're going to want him for a couple of different reasons. It's still a very important character, and if you don't have one, you're definitely going to feel the strain. But you got to look at it from more than just a skilling perspective. You got to look at it from how good is its mobbing, how good is its bossing, how good is its drop rate. Are you going to want to actively push with a Barbarian? And the answer is just going to be no. So Barbarian is going to be a solid B pick for me. And now up is the Squire, and the Squire is actually going to be the first one that I'm going to put into A tier. And the reason for that is just how important construction is. So the Squire is a World 2 class that you unlock that will... it's a unlock in World 2 that has use in World 3, if that makes sense. And the skill that it specializes in is construction, and there's just so much that you need construction for. From different perks that you can unlock in the game, to towers for tower defense, to the different shrines. You're going to inevitably always want to Squire and always want to be pushing its skill, because it will unlock almost everything for you. So Squire becomes one of the better classes in the game, which we're going to touch on once we get down to the Divine Knight. But Squire is going to be an easy A pick for me. Definitely one of the strongest classes you can pick up. Would definitely recommend rounding out your squad with 1, and sometimes some people run 2. I personally run 1, but absolutely beast of a class. Definitely recommend. So next up we have Bowman. Bowman's going to be a quick B pick for me. So its specialized skill is going to be catching. And catching is, without a doubt, important. But it kind of falls into the same vein as the Barbarian, where you're going to want the bugs, you're going to need the bugs, you're going to need them for a lot of different things, from leveling up bubbles to you name it, right? But in terms of mobbing, in terms of using it as a progression class, it's not really there. I think other classes do it better, and I'm trying to look at it from the entire perspective of how important X is to your account. So I'm going to have to say Bowman, solid B tier. It does become an exceptional class here soon enough with Siegebreaker, but we'll discuss Siegebreaker in just a second. So next up is going to be the Hunter. Now, most people, and I think darn near everyone who plays the game, they only run one Hunter, and that's for a very good reason. So the Hunter, its specialization is going to be trapping. It eventually becomes the Beastmaster, which will, specialize in breeding. But even with that added benefit, gonna have to put the Hunter down in C tier. So what it does is it collects critters, gets different traps that can, subsequently collect more and more critters. You're gonna need the critters from stuff like construction. You're going to need it for things like bubbles, and no doubt that is super important. But its entire skill set as a whole, again, mobbing, to use it to push, to use it to kill bosses, in every other aspect of the game, the Hunter is quite lackluster. And it more or less becomes what's called a little bit later on a lab slave, where it just sits in the lab and it collects XP from the lab, and then you use it just to collect traps with its use of the skill Eagle Eye. So not really breaking any ground here. Not really a superb class as it sits right now. And I'll go into a little bit more why, because later on when we start to get into the elite classes, there's a lot of cool things that those elite classes can do, where the Hunter just, it can't keep up. And now we're coming into the Mage classes. First up, we're going to have one of my favorite classes from when I was leveling. And just because its elite class is going to be an S, I'm going to put this one down in A. The Shaman is possibly one of the best classes in the game, from its base class as a Shaman all the way up to its elite class as a Bubonic Conjurer. It is one of the heavy lifters. It's one of those that you absolutely need, and I mean, if you don't have one on your account, right, you have 10 chances to get a Shaman. If you don't get a Shaman, you did something wrong, you know. You might have to wait till Lava makes a class change token, or you might need to start the game over. But the Shaman is huge. So it is what's going to end up specializing in alchemy. And alchemy is absolutely, possibly the most important skill in the game, because it touches every aspect of the game, from crit rate to drop rate to base skill to damage per main stat to vials to sigils, you name it. The Shaman and its ability later on with the Bubonic Conjurer and just how they mix together makes this one of the strongest classes in the game. And even in its base class as a Shaman without its elite class, it is exceptional at progression. It's exceptional at getting damage up faster than other classes just from unlocking vials and getting vials to level 4 through one of its talents. It is an exceptional class in almost every single regard. So highly recommend one Shaman. I personally run 2 Shamans. One to sit on the far side of the lab to, you know, get more XP. One on the left to get larger, I believe it's lab width. So I might have mixed that up. It might be the other way. Either way, Shamans into Bubonic Conjurers, absolutely fantastic class. Cannot stress enough just how good they are. All right, next up is going to be Wizard. And Wizard is, again, one of those weird ones to place, just because it inevitably becomes an elemental sorcerer, which, as we're going to discuss, is an absolutely phenomenal class. But it itself, where it specializes in worship, it's just not groundbreaking. But with that being said, I am going to put it obviously above a warrior and above a Jman. But I do think it falls behind the other 2 classes just from a mobbing perspective, because every warrior can obviously cleave. From a Bowman perspective, that can catch, I think, worship. By the time you're really getting good at it, you know, it's kind of that snowball effect where one day you wake up, it's so hard to get souls. Next thing you know, all your TDs are past level 100. You've all got the maxed worship skull. They've all got the worship bubble on. And all of a sudden, worship just isn't a big deal for you anymore. With that being said, though, you are going to need a lot of souls in order to progress through the game. So it does fit comfortably right in the middle of the pack, where I don't think it's really breaking a lot of ground, but it's more important than a couple other classes. All right, now we have the big man himself, the Maestro. Now, this one is going to be difficult to place, so I do want it to be an S tier, but I can also understand why it would be an A tier, just because a Maestro who specializes in all skills is instrumental to a good account. But if it's created wrong, or if it's leveled up wrong, or anything like that, it's kind of a waste of space. And what I mean by that is if you don't think about how you're going to build your Maestro, like I said, it just sits there on your account. So there's things you need to take into consideration, like your Maestro needing to be the highest level in all of the skills in order to utilize one of its talents later on. So what that does is it gives you efficiency if the Maestro is the highest level in that skill. So for example, we're chopping, right? Which your mage classes are going to do. If your Maestro has the highest level chopping, your other classes that chop, your Shaman, your Wizard, they're going to get a bonus to their efficiency. But on the downside, let's say that your Shaman is 41 chopping, whereas your Maestro is only 40. Because your Maestro is not the top, your other classes don't get the benefit. So that's kind of one of those double-edged swords where, you know, now all of a sudden what could be an S tier class is actually a D tier because it's providing no benefit to your account. Something else you need to take into consideration. Maestro, like all other classes, has a special skill that increases its damage based on X. And in Maestro's case, it increases the damage based on your skills. So in the very beginning, when your skills are, you know, kind of on the low level, your Maestro, it's hitting like a wet paper towel, to be blunt. But with a little bit more progression, a little bit more strength, the Maestro can become a very good class. So currently, my Maestro, with base level 70 and all the skills, is at 234 million damage base, and that's with the full Curse of McLuty. So with whatever that damage reduction is, it still hits pretty hard at 234 million. The last thing that you have to take into consideration is, while its base class, which is the where did Jman go, is Jman, which Jman specializes in looting, Maestro is not a mobber. You're not going to use Maestro to farm for rare materials. A lot of people say you can. I personally don't, just because I think it has better uses. I personally use Maestro as a boss killer. So once you get to that level with enough damage, Maestro and his ability to get, double drops based off of drops or off of bosses is huge. Especially if you're going for things like wings, you're going for things like obols, you're going for another Chiswar scarf. I think Maestro comes ahead. But in terms of quickly progressing, in terms of, getting through a new world the fastest, Maestro it doesn't have the skills, it doesn't have the cleave, it's quite slow to progress. So I'm gonna put Maestro in S tier, just because I think the benefit of what it gives your account through the Printer Go Brewer skill, and then the added efficiency that it gives to all your other characters, I think it can't be understated. It's also the best boss killer in terms of loot in the game, so I think it sits comfortably as the king of S tier. Alright, starting to get good. We're getting into the elite classes. First up is going to be the Blood Berserker. So the Blood Berserker is the upgrade from the Barbarian, and while its mobbing is exponentially higher, and it also introduces a new skill which is going to be cooking, I don't think that it's good enough to put in S tier. I think I'm going to put it above the Shaman in terms of usability, or in terms of I can't think of the word I'm thinking of. In terms of how useful it is to the account, the Shaman is still huge, but it becomes better when it becomes a Bubonic Conjurer. So in this vein, I'm going to put it below the Squire, but above the Shaman, comfortably in the A tier, just because of how important cooking is. Because cooking is, like the Shaman, it touches all the skills. You're getting crit rate from it, you're getting breedability chance, you're getting breed speed, you're getting all kinds of things from cooking. So it does take a little bit more work to set up than a Shaman, because you do have to you have to chow in order to get enough efficiency. And there's a lot of people who kind of write it off because they're only getting 100 ladles a day. But when you start to get 1100, 1200, 1300 ladles, your Blood Berserker quickly becomes a staple of your account in order to progress cooking. So while it doesn't fit any other niche other than being phenomenal at cooking, it's not a great mobber. You're not going to use it to go kill bosses. You're not going to use it to push in dungeons, especially with some of the newer classes that just do it so much easier. But cooking can't be overstated, so definitely going to put it into A tier, and I think it's quite comfortable there. Alright, the last warrior class we have is the Divine Knight. And the Divine Knight, which is an upgrade from the Squire, who is already in A tier, I think is going to fit very comfortably in S tier, just because of what the Divine Knight does now. It's huge, it is. So Divine Knight fits the niche of a couple different things. You absolutely should be using it to kill your mini bosses every couple days. So you can kill all the mobs on the screen, drop your orb at the very beginning of it, get up to a very comfortable level before your orb despawns, then summon the boss. And what that's going to do is going to just jump your drop rate through the roof, and you're going to see much bigger returns. So Divine Knight, absolutely phenomenal mini boss killer. It is also phenomenal in the arena. Exact same thing. Drop the orb first, go through the arena, kill everything. You're going to see just beautiful returns on the arena. It also is phenomenal at statue farming. And I say that it does statue farming better than any of the other classes. So 100% DK, solidified in S tier. It fits a niche. It fits mini boss farming, it fits arena farming, it fits statue farming, and it is also a very good dungeon farmer. So Divine Knight, all the way up in S tier, love it. And that's not even how important it is to the World 5 skill gaming. Without the Divine Knight skill, I was at sub 1 billion gaming, and then leveling him up, I'm at about 4 billion gaming. So you cannot stress Divine Knight enough. It is probably ahead of the Maestro in terms of just sheer account importance. But we're going to move on. We're going to go to Siegebreaker. So Siegebreaker is actually a newer class. I sadly have not been able to make a video about it just yet. And as much as it's going to hurt, because in every single game that I've played, anything with a bow has become my favorite class, and it is what it is. I love archers in general. The Siegebreaker, which specializes in sailing, it just does not fit a niche enough to warrant putting it above something else. So I'm actually going to put it behind the Shaman. And a couple of reasons for that. True, sailing is one of the most important skills in the game. It touches a lot of different things. There's, artifacts that can increase your skill efficiency. There's artifacts that increase your damage just exponentially. And those are all great. They are. But in terms of the rest of the game, because I've used my Siegebreaker, I've got him up to some meme damage of 132 billion. It's fantastic. It also becomes one of the greatest green mushroom farmers. I'm getting 2.75 million G-Mush kills an hour. So that is pretty good, and it fits those roles perfectly. But unlike the Maestro and unlike the DK so far, that also go on to have very niche things that they specialize in, such as statue farming or general account progression. Once sailing is done and you've gotten every artifact and you've ancient every artifact, it becomes a G-Mush farmer, and that's pretty much it. It did have a new skill. Can't overlook it. The more plunder kills that you have, you can increase the drop rate of your account, which is a fantastic skill. It's a reasonable boost to all of your characters' drop rate, and possibility to become S in the future if lava does change it. It makes it a little bit easier to get those plunder kills, because going for 100,000 or 1,000,000 of those right now, not feasible. You can do it. you can do it, but it's not going to be fun. So I think Siegebreaker is going to be comfortable in A tier. It's not the best mobber. It's a great boss killer, but there's other classes that are just better at doing it in terms of loot. Moving on. So we have the Beastmaster, something that's going to specialize in the World 4 skill of breeding. But it falls off in almost every single regard. So as the S tier is kind of flushed out here, especially with the last two characters, they all have something that the Beastmaster doesn't, right? Excluding Maestro, the Divine Knight, the Bubo, and the Elemental Sorcerer, they can all respawn mobs, where Beastmaster has a skill that speeds up the respawn of mobs. It doesn't immediately respawn the mob. So in terms of mobbing, it's just not that great. In terms of its usability as an account progression tool, it still has trapping, and then it gets breeding. But really, I mean, I don't think it really carries as much weight. I think it is absolutely the best out of all of them in terms of B tier, but I don't think that it deserves a higher spot than that. I just don't think it brings enough to the team. If there was a rework and Beastmaster's mobbing was better instead of just dropping 20 whales on things, and it was better at respawning mobs, then sure, I could see it being a little bit higher. But I think it's going to be Beastmaster is stuck in B. So next up is the Bubo. And the Bubonic Conjurer, which specializes in the laboratory, which is a World 4 skill, I think, personally, is the strongest character in the game. May not be in terms of sheet damage, but in terms of alchemy progression and in terms of money generation, which you're going to need for stamps, I don't think the Bubonic Conjurer can be beat. It was the first class to have that immediate respawn feature. And I think that what it brings in terms of account progression through alchemy is enough to keep it in S tier and to be the most important S tier character there is. I really don't think there's much more to talk on about Bubo. It's, in my humble opinion, the most important character in the game. And that will bring up the Elemental Sorcerer. Elemental Sorcerer was just added to the game, and I think it's found a really, really good niche, which It is phenomenal at farming monster drops and also at farming rares from monsters. So, for example, you could have expected a week to get, 2 500 hamsters, whatever you might have needed for the new material bags, depending on which character you're using to get it. With Elemental Sorcerer, I can get about 100 hamsters every night, so every 8 to 10 hours is 100 hamsters. And the monster drops, I can get 1 million G-Mush caps a portal. So in terms of being able to level up your vials through monster materials, to constantly keep your refinery chugging, and then to also get rare materials, like right now, before I leave for this trip, my Elemental Sorcerer is hunting down the pearls in World 4. And it's been running now for about 7 hours, and I think I'm at about 65 pearls. So just under 10 pearls an hour. I'm going to be gone for 3 days. That could equate to almost 1,000, maybe a little bit less, in pearls. So I think Elemental Sorcerer came in, and like all the other classes excluding the Maestro, it has that immediate respawn feature. It has amazing mobbing potential, and it is also phenomenal in dungeons. I know a lot of people run DKs, a lot of people run Bubos. I really think Elemental Sorcerer is the move for dungeons. I think it's just the best dungeon clearer. I think I am north of 5.5 minutes as far as a 4th frog kill on my Elemental Sorcerer. I think it is just that good at the game. But yeah, I'm looking at my screen now. I've been talking for almost 27 minutes now. I think moving Elemental Sorcerer over here, and it would honestly be a tie between the DK and the Elemental Sorcerer. I just love watching how the Elemental Sorcerer kills mobs a little bit more than DK. I'd have to say that I think this is my finalized tier list for Legends of IdleOn with World 5. If you disagree, absolutely let me down below. If you think you agree, but man, you really wish that, your favorite character, the Barbarian, got a little bit more love, let me know down below. But it's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you, brothers, and I'll catch you in the next one.